folks, here today we talk about one of the most fascinating stocks in the entire stock market, in my opinion, Palantir, PLTR. This is a stock that's fascinated me for the past year or so. This is one of those rare opportunities. It feels a lot like Tesla did many years ago, before Tesla went on its big run. And I've always, done more and more research in this company and try to understand it on a higher and higher level. Because this is a company that's market cap right now is under $30 billion, okay? Under $30 billion. And this company has a feelings, and based upon where you could see revenue going to over the coming years, where net income could go over the coming years, you can see how this company can scale into a $100 billion market cap, if not many hundreds of billions of dollars in market cap. And you don't get those sorts of opportunities in the market too often. And this stock recently has been floundering anywhere between $13 and $14. And it seems like a very misunderstood stock. So I came across this video last night, essentially, and I watched it very late at night, about 1 a.m. And I watched the whole thing, and it was amazing. And I was about to watch it all again, and I thought, let's go ahead and, instead of me just keeping this to myself, let's go ahead and do a reaction to this. And so, only 11,000 people have gotten to see this video. I'm hoping a whole lot more than 11,000 people will be aware of this. I think it's a fascinating video, and you're going to learn a lot in this video, okay? Asking a former IBM employee why he's long Palantir. And this gentleman comes from this industry, and so he's one of those people, if he's bullish on a specific company for specific reasons and he's kind of inside this industry, it's something you should at least pay attention to. Let's just put it that way. And there's a lot of people from this industry that are very knowledgeable on why big companies should use these sorts of business models. And so if somebody like him is really excited about it, you got to listen up, and you got to listen, like, why is he so excited? Because he could put his money in a lot of stocks, right? But he's from this industry, and it's interesting because he wanted to invest in Palantir like over a decade ago, essentially. He saw like the promise of this business. And now that it's a public company, he can invest in it. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy this. Hope you learn a lot. Thank you to this YouTuber. I don't think I've ever come across his videos before. Amit, thank you. Once again, I hope I pronounced your name right there. Thank you for putting this video together. This is a freaking good video. That's all I'm going to say about this, okay? So let's watch it together. Let me react to it. If you want some free stocks from Moomoo, the professional trading platform, hey, they even got a deal right now where you can get free TTCF share with a $100 deposit. Check out pinned comment down there. Also, if you want to sign up for our daily business and stock and crypto newsletter, check out pinned comment down there as well. That's absolutely free to do so. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and jump into this, and let me know your opinion on Palantir in the comment section. Love to hear from you guys. Are you bullish on it? Are you bearish on it? Are you indifferent? Love to hear from you guys in that comment section.
The Amit Courageous Show. I am here with Sean Troy, and Sean has a pretty deep background. You guys probably don't know too much about him. I will link his YouTube in the description. He is one of those people that I think is going to be able to shed some amazing insight on Palantir, particularly because he has 20 years of specialized experience working with data and analytics. He works with...
By the way, completely random, but Corsair is making a massive move up after hours. From my understanding, they're getting in the S&P 600 small cap index. Very good.
Very intimately, and he was originally working on Watson at IBM. So I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion just to get a really good technical perspective on some of the core elements of Palantir's business model and their moat, which is AI and machine learning. So Sean, thank you for being on. Can you first start off by saying, when did you get interested in Palantir, and when did you actually start making your investment?
Yeah, for sure. So this is a really interesting story, and thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate it. I was coming back. I'm in the Boston area. I was flying back from San Francisco to Boston. This is going back years, actually decades. And I'm sitting on the plane. I had a couple meetings that day, getting ready to kind of relax and call it a night. And someone turns around and says, "Hey, dude, you're Sean. We were just talking at this conference about AI." And he goes, "Have you heard of this company called Palantir? It's some Lord of the Rings reference or something." and I had just heard some rumblings about it. I know Peter Thiel was involved. I had a little bit of idea of what was happening there, but not much, right? Very familiar with the space, understand the needs of being more intelligent and deploying analytics. And he drops an article on my little tray table. He says, "Dude, have a read and let's grab a coffee after we get off this plane." So,
it's old. This is from a long time ago. If he drops an article for you to read, nowadays it's like you airdrop it through your phone or something like that, or you send it over a text. Like, drop an actual physical article for you here, sir.
Later, we land in Boston. It's 3 a.m, and we talk for 2.5 hours about Palantir. This company that's doing cutting-edge GovCloud work, really integrating real-time data and analytics into the workflow to create a better process for having what we call typically edge or IoT-based data at scale. Yep. And I was like, holy moly, I got to get my eyes around this company. So I checked out their website. They're literally not hiring anyone. And I said, well, okay, cool. So this is really hardcore Silicon Valley structure. We're going to go with devs and engineers first. And that was sort of like the first seed of, okay, this is who's coming down the pipeline. I want to start paying attention. And with them and some others, I've been really deep in the space and sort of really looking at the big picture of where we're going globally from a macro perspective, as well as where these companies succeed from a micro perspective. But I'll pause there for a second. So that's sort of where the hook hit the water on a random flight with a random dude I hadn't seen for years that I worked with years ago.
This was in 2020 or 2021?
When was this?
Yeah.
No, I'm talking like 2008.
Oh, so you found about Palantir a while ago.
Oh yeah, this is when the technology was first being developed. There were these names that you guys know today were not the names I knew them as.
See, this is really key. This gentleman knows what he's talking about. He's from this industry, and he's been tracking Palantir for 14 years now. It's not like he's some new person that doesn't know about this industry and he read up on the stock and he got all hyped. Like, this gentleman's been following this company for 14 years now.
We're looking at sort of some of the issues they were having, governance issues around the data. There were big conversations at the time as well on how the data was being collected, whose was being collected. The things that we aren't talking about as much today is where it was back in those days, really heavy on the data governance and operationability perspective. So cool stuff back then.
And that makes sense in 2008 that you were so into it because your professional job is in this industry, right? So like you kind of need to know through the grapevine what's going on in the industry.
It was a potential competitor at best, or a point of interest, a potential job as well down the road if it was interesting.
Got it. Okay, now take me to your background a little bit. Can you talk and tell the audience kind of what you do in regards to data, AI, analytics as like a day job, or just like kind of where your head is at every day? And we can transition on how that relates to why you're bullish on Palantir.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I've got a great scenario we can run through with your startup actually on how I would think about segmentation and classification to grow your company.
Okay.
So first and foremost, I work within sort of the technical sales and consulting side of AI machine learning. I meet with executives of companies all over North America and help them to understand what digital disruption looks like, how to leverage AI machine learning at scale, how to embed that into their process. And I have a pillared approach that I do. I'll explain this in a second. And what we do is we talk through business cases, use cases, trying to understand the total cost of ownership versus ROI of these edge-based AI technologies.
Right.
And what we really try to get down to the nuts and bolts of is where within an organization can we leverage autonomous learning and intelligence to define and deploy better KPI metrics, right? How do we start asking questions of the business? I'll give you a great example. I don't need a list of all of my customers who have churned.
Right.
I need a list of the customers who are going to churn in 3 months, why they're going to churn and what I can do about it. That's what I need to do. And so that's a majority of what I spend my time doing. It's a lot of
That's really powerful what he just pointed out there. That's a key to business. It's like, okay, if somebody's already out of the business model, right? Like, how's that relevant to me? It's like, okay, we can try to get them back, but they're already gone. You need to know about the folks that could leave in 3 months from now and why they might leave. If you can have that type of info as a business, that's beyond massive, because then you can put a stop to it before it happens. Essentially,
fun conversation.
Kind of like the movie iRobot. I don't know if you guys ever saw that, or no, I don't think it's actually iRobot. Minority Report. I think that was a movie with Tom Cruise where they could stop something bad from happening before it even happens. Crazy, man.
And I'll tell you too, I think the biggest challenge, and this is both a positive and a negative for Palantir, we can get into this as we go, is it's early, man. It doesn't feel like we're early, but it is early in the process of analytics and AI. I think
that's coming from a guy that's been watching this company for 14 years. He says it's still early innings. Early.
There's this. Let me actually take you back in time. So going back to about 08, 09, working at IBM, was there for a decade. We had put out this thing called the AQ, a little bit of a play on words of the IQ. AQ is the analytics quotient. And what we did is we went out to something like 5,000 or 10,000 CIOs globally and basically asked a number of questions about where they are on a digital journey in and around data at scale. And the thing was, what we were trying to do is build out a very heavy thesis around the idea that a data-driven organization is one that delivers better results to their customers, a better experience to the customers, and then better results for themselves. I actually wrote down 3 things. I have to look to my left to read them to you because I thought these are things I use every day. Okay. But data-driven organizations are 23 times more likely to add customers, 15 times more value is delivered to their customers, and then 6.5 times more likely to retain customers. Mm-hmm. This is important because these are the challenges of the modern executive, and especially the modern CRO or revenue officer. Their challenges are so unique today from what they were before because the interoperability of SaaS-based software systems that can be turned on or off, connected easily. It's so easy to get churned out of an account without even knowing why because of one single bad experience.
Right.
So we have a lot of conversations like that with our customers. So that's, in a nutshell, what I'm very lucky to get to do.
And you're not working with IBM anymore, right? You're kind of doing your own.
That is correct. Yeah, I can't say who I work for right now. I'm under NDA, but long time with it. And actually, my company before this company was also supported by some of the folks who are supporting Palantir. So it was another intelligence company doing some really cool stuff with what we called exhaust data, basically taking data that no one else wanted and doing reverse identity profiling on it. Really cool stuff.
So what I'm getting out of this is you've been in this industry for a decade now, at least a little bit longer than a decade. And your understanding of this industry is that the technological transformation that is happening, which we're basically at the beginning at, is companies, organizations, nonprofits, any important institution in the world that is going to have any influence in the world, and obviously companies have a lot of influence in the world because they support people's lives by giving them jobs, is going to have to keep their companies running. And in the new technological age that we're going into, in order to keep that company running, they're going to have to understand data at the most granular levels and at the most macro levels. And in order to understand data at those levels, there have to be presumably some predictive simulative technologies that are able to help you model the decisions you're going to have to make based upon data that you don't even understand how to make sense of.
I think it's so much even more than that. I think we can boil the ocean down to this. There will be those who execute on AI and intelligence and those who don't, and they'll be gone. And that's going to be the full stop here. You know, it's like how many companies have survived without going online? You know, that's what's going to be happening here very soon.
But before we keep going into Palantir, I want you to break this down for me from someone who understands this probably more than a lot of people in the world. What is AI?
Yeah, so let me give you my little diatribe that I like to deliver here. So when I think about this question of what is AI, machine learning, intelligence at scale, what I like to think about is when we go and look at your organization, right? This could be sales, service, CX, operations, research. This could be your HR department, your finance and accounting department. We have data that lives everywhere. It lives in silos. Silos can be Excel sheets. It could be data warehouses. It could be data lakes. It could be anywhere within the organization, right? What we need to do is find a way to operationalize all of that data at scale in a way that's meaningful and makes sense when we output it to the end user, okay? Right. So what I oftentimes like to imagine is I'm going to take this big smart blanket. I'm going to lay it over your entire business. This blanket has to have the ability as a layer to pull every piece of data up and into it, bring it all into one singular, easy to understand and standardized view, and then allow me to run automatic models off of that information. I'm going to get into this in a second here, why AI plays into this. So once I have all of my data connected, I have that connectivity, I have it living within this layer, this blanket layer of my business. Now I need to operationalize that data. So what I need is, I need to do a couple different things. I need to first have the ability to figure out how and where I'm going to be able to connect this data, make it look the same. So I need to have a data prep layer. This means that there could be some squares and some circles, some cars and some potatoes. And I need them all to come together and just be data points that look similar, right?
Right.
And I want to do a couple different things in terms of operationalizing data at scale. I want to be able to embed this information everywhere where my teams need it in a contextual format. So think of it like this. You wouldn't put the GPS in your trunk. You want it next to the steering wheel, or even better on your phone where you can just listen to it, right? That's an embedded contextual experience, right? Where insights follow the user based on the questions they're asking. A sales team might say, what's my propensity to sell more to this customer? What's the best cross-sell or upsell opportunity? We also want to have an augmentative process as well. How do I take in even more data from third-party sources where they're not currently connected today? We're seeing this in really cool ways with Palantir, but I'll get into that later. We want to look at this from not only perspective of what kind of third-party data can we leverage at scale, but then how do we augment with more of a prescriptive output? How do I know what to do, why I'm doing it, and subsequently the impact it will have on my business?
Right.
Now, the AI piece of this, which is really cool and probably my favorite part, is I want to create intelligent automation around all these different points, right? And what I want to use is really like a predictive engine to do this. So back in 05, 06, 07, the idea of a prediction was I got 10 red balloons in a row. I'm likely to get another red balloon. So let's make sure we keep stocking red balloons.
Right.
What I want to start to understand at scale around this predictive automatic modeling is how do we start to recognize patterns we're missing? It could be a primary, right? Like, hey, once in a while someone comes in for blue. Or it could be a secondary that we actually have a higher margin when we sell blue if we throw in a purple string on top, right? And then we've got tertiary levels of engagement amongst data where, hey, you may never have thought of this, but on Tuesdays when it's raining, we're more likely to sell this, so make sure we have those in stock, right? What we want to start doing is have the system automatically take processes or steps for it.
Two things. First, if you guys are enjoying me showing a video like this that's a little more in depth, let me know in the comment section. Every once in a while I find some random gems out there on YouTube, and so I could do more of this type of stuff in the future. So let me know in the comments if you enjoy a format like this where, you know, I highlight one of these gems and kind of react to it. Two, when it comes to Palantir, you know, the first thing I kind of think about, the sales process a little hard at first because it's such an intricate system and it's so overlapping of everything. But at the end of the day, when you really take into account, like if you were a business, right, and let's say you spend, I don't know, $5 million on Palantir, let's say, for instance, right, it's a big corporation. Man, you know, if they are going to make you back 20 mil, 30 mil, 50 mil, 100 mil, it's such a drop in the bucket if they can get you that type of ROI by making all your decisions better because you're using all the data in a much smarter way than just trying to guess or trying to use old school systems you have and things like that, right? So that's the promise with Palantir, is that massive opportunity there.
So this is oftentimes what we think of as like in-process AI, where when we start to see things happen that they speak to a trend or something is changing, how do we create an automatic action driven off of this? And this is the key piece. And as more data comes in on a regular and consistent basis, the model will self-learn like a flywheel, right? More and more data keeps coming in, it keeps learning faster and faster, keeps changing the outputs. And those outputs derive how we look at scoring, how we look at what comes next in the process. Customers are trending towards churning long before the renewals do. We need to do something about that right now. Maybe we create, you know, a case for our customer success team. Or we think, hey, this customer fits the profile of someone who spends twice as much but is using these two other products. Let's push that notification out to a sales rep.
Right.
Sort of the fourth pillar of this is this idea of prioritization by leveraging AI within the process. Prioritization is the piece that, in my experience, is most important to the C-suite in general. So CEOs, CROs, COOs, et cetera. Prioritization is really understanding what we're working on, the impact it's going to have, and why we need to do it right now. Which leads do we follow up on today? which have the highest likelihood of converting, which products sell best and have the highest margin rates, et cetera. That's really the way we think about it. So I define an intelligent experience based on AI's ability to embed information everywhere, augment with third-party data and prescriptive analytics, automating, leveraging predictions that take advantage of changes in scoring, and prioritization as a way to create velocity and agility in and around your business.
That is one of the most comprehensive. That's one of the most comprehensive definitions I've ever heard of AI, explained in a way that's actually simple to understand. So thank you for that. I think that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned a lot about how we need to have predictive analysis of data in order to make sense of it. Did the rise of AI happen and it become basically this buzzword in the past decade because companies were generating so much data? Or did you think inevitably, based upon how technology works, there was going to be something intelligent that was going to emerge as a result of just innovation?
So I've got a great, easy conceptual way to think about this. With the absolute explosion of data, and there's no better way to say this, it is no longer conceivable that we can take and simply just merge files together and then quickly look at a visualization and say, oh, look, here's what we need to do.
Right.
Because we have data coming not just in so much scale, but across so many different platforms and services, we need a way to basically have a system that can automatically represent, understand, and prepare that data in a way we can create analytics off of it, right? So any good AI-based company or system is going to have two layers, right? Data prep, connectivity, and then visualization and sort of, explanation. As we've seen it go from like these on-premise servers and data warehouses, right? Like think like you got to rent a big factory, you stand up a bunch of these servers and they store all your information on hardware. Now that anyone and their mother can start a company in the next 2 days with $200, rent space for their data and have that data live all over the world, it's created this need to be able to pull it together really quickly and really easily. So the way I like to think about it is this. You walk into a supermarket and there's aisles, and above each aisle is like, I don't know, bread, cheese, whatever. Then there's milk and soda, then cookies and chips. You know exactly which aisle you need to go to. You go halfway down, you know where your chips are that you like. Now, the problem today is that's not the way a lot of data is organized because it looks and feels so different. What we now have is like a junkyard approach to data. I just have 10,000 cars in all their different parts in a humongous pile. I don't have hours to spend sorting through and looking for an exhaust for a 1983 Buick Regal, my first car, by the way. What I need to instantly say, I need the exhaust for a 1983 Buick, and it goes, here it is, here's the exact coordinates of it. Let's pin down, grab that right away for you. This is where the ability to have a system that can learn and understand and keep track of and work with that data, it really scales and helps you to deliver those like immediate insights.
I think you explain that on the best level possible. Imagine you're a big organization. The amount of data overload you have on your customers or potential customers and things like that, it's overwhelming. But what would be magical is if you had something that can take all that data, show you what's relevant, and give you results-based actions on we need to do this or that and things like that. So rather than just have this gauntlet of data and you have to try to manually go through it and try to make these decisions, what if you had a program that could make those decisions for you and decipher what's actually important and what's not, and is constantly learning? That's the other key thing. Constantly learning, it's constantly updating itself, it's constantly getting better and better over time, refining the approach, right? And doing this all in real time. That's where the real magic happens, and I hope everybody understands that point he just made there.
What's really particularly interesting here as well, on the same note that you're mentioning, much like Palantir and much like many companies in this space, the reason we see it start with military applications is because it's mission critical, and a lot of times it's life or death. So you get not only boatloads of data, but you're getting data at scale tied to important mission critical outcomes. So there's oftentimes a lot of money to work in that space. It's not hard to raise the capital, but those use cases, it's those kinds of use cases that are really the edge of AI, that like tip of the spear. It has to be light and fast. It has to always be correct, and it has to have no fail. So whether this means erroring or whatever the case might be, that's why companies like Palantir, as they move from military to commercial, I know we'll get into this, that's where I get excited, because like that learning, that ability for that AI to recognize patterns well ahead of time with years of experience in doing it, that's where the real value comes in. But it's even more than that too, right? When we think about data, it's I get excited, and I'm lucky to work in this field because it's not just sales and service data. It's not customer revenue data, right? It's everything. It's IoT or Internet of Things data, right? It's weather data. It's geospatial data. It's everything. And the problem is when you're trying to combine how much money a customer spends in 12 months with the weather on a particular day based on the current temperature of their washing machine, there's no way to do that without some sort of intelligent data prep that then puts it together in a usable format and deploys it to the user.
When I think about like old retail and working for retailers like Walgreens and Quick Trip and things like that back in the day, if we were ordering inventory or something like that, we had to kind of like manually overlook it all. But the problem was a lot of times that data was looking over the past 6 months or 12 months the store had been open. So it's saying, hey, you should probably order this many of this items, and it would give us a suggestion, which is kind of a form of artificial intelligence in a sense, right? But the problem with that was it wasn't doing it nearly as real time as you need. And so a lot of times what I found is we had to override the system essentially because it wasn't really taking into account like the changes in weather, which could affect the business dramatically, or certain products and things like that. And so it was consistent and we'd have to override things, or it doesn't take into account that, over the past 3 months, we only sell this many apple fritters, but now we got this customer who comes in and buys 6 every single day, and we need to like update that, right? It's still taking the mean of the last 3 months or something like that, rather than real time and understanding, we're selling this many consistently over the past 2-3 days. I need to start ordering ... And so these are the sorts of things that I think are important, because if the human's not there to override that and see that, then you consistently miss business. If you only order the 3 apple fritters and the guy wants 6 every day, and your system keeps telling you order 3 or order 4, you're still not meeting them. You're failing your customer in the end. You're making less money, you're making less revenue, and making less profit.
To give you a heads up that, hey, that washing machine is really running really hot. It's going to be 90 degrees tomorrow. We've got to get a service rep out there and fix that thing for me before it fails. Those are the kind of end use cases I want to see.
Piggybacking off what you just said, when I think of something like YouTube or Spotify or any type of recommendation engine, it seems like for consumers, at least at this point, 2022 in our lives, companies have been able to leverage AI, machine learning, predictive analytics to be able to figure out when you launch this app on your phone, in 10 seconds, you will find something to consume, which means they get the benefit of our attention. They can probably sell ads against it, and we get the benefit of the content. It seems like AI used to simply sell advertising, which I don't say is a negative thing, but in general, it's a pretty minute thing, is probably not the biggest use case for data analytics, machine learning. Like, can you speak to a little bit about where you think the real use cases could be a decade from now, outside of finding a better video to watch?
100%. There are so many tiers of complexity based on the levels of data that we want to connect to and understand. And I think about it oftentimes in terms of, to what degree of statistical relevance do we need in the model, right? If we're trying to predict the likelihood that you and I click on an ad, it's okay if they're at a 52% rate. Hey, more often than not, they're going to click on the ad. That's a pretty good win. If we're talking about how often a critical server is going to go down based on some sort of assessment of the build and where it sits within those IoT metrics, right? The heat, et cetera, how many times it's been turned on and off, or how many pieces are running on it. That's pretty important. That could be mission critical. Where I get just super pumped up about this stuff. And again, I'm really lucky because I get to live and breathe this, is when we start thinking about healthcare, medicine, biopharmaceuticals, that is where it's exciting. We're dealing with so many data points across so many things we oftentimes don't know. I mean, what's going on in the world today is a perfect example where love it, hate it, indifferent, whatever your stance is on COVID vaccines and everything else. The reality is, if you look at how fast they turned around, executable medicine against a global virus that came from nowhere, essentially, that is only with the power of extensive and real-time data prep. Yeah. And what we're seeing is even the commercialization of that, where now we need to have the ability to figure out, tracking, tracking against who could have had it, who was near someone. I have kids in school. We get an email every single day basically saying like, hey, there's a close contact. Here's what to look out for, et cetera. And it's sort of that baseline ability to recognize what are the proteins that make up this virus? How are they interacting with cells? How do we figure out a way to create some sort of vaccine against it? And then here we are today, right? And I think that this is where we're going to get really, really deep in the future of maybe I can throw something on my arm that's going to detect my likelihood of having a heart attack in the next 30 days, right? Or really looking at cancer research or blindness or dementia or any of these things that have really blown our minds and not gotten us there. The other piece to me that's equally as big, or really two things, is I think coming at it from the environmental and energy impact is how do we optimize and create better systematic approaches and really, really go deep into understanding what can we do to generate more energy and more scale, but at less cost and less risk to all of us on the planet, right? If you go back 30, 40, 50 years, nuclear power was going to be the thing. Who even talks about that anymore, right? I mean, I can't even tell you last time someone said, hey, you're going to open up a new nuclear plant. No. I live on the East Coast. We've got, out in Massachusetts in the Cape, we've got the big, of course, I can't think of the name I'm thinking of. The big windmills, right? The,
turbines?
Turbines, yeah. The turbine engines are up in the skies, right? And you look at that and yeah, they don't move that fast. They're not super efficient, but it's better than nothing, right? We're seeing solar farms start to open up in my neck of the woods, but it's not very efficient because then they have to move power over long distances. And we're seeing this in New York. There's actually something on Bloomberg the other day where they're building this massive solar site, and they're going to have it piped directly to New York City. But again, it's a scale problem. Only data and only data at scale can solve for this. The other thing that ties into all of this is also when we look at our food industry, right? I did a video like months back on what I thought the next $1 trillion industries were going to be. And I was really focused on biopharma, agriculture, and energy, because those are things that we simply just do not have answers for, even though we think we do, right? It's not a question of just drilling more. It's not a question of just having more farms. We need that farmland for those solar panels. Right. We need the solar panel, right? It's like one thing has to hurt the other. So I think only with more intelligent systems where we're driving data at scale and getting those insights at scale can we really bring that to the market in a way that's going to be efficient. And in many ways, what I'm looking for in real time is who is the company delivering the shovels, not doing the digging for the gold. And that's what brings us oftentimes these conversations.
And that's what also brings us to Palantir. So if you go to Palantir and their website, I mean, when I first really started getting into it about a year ago, there is just so many different verticals that they're attacking. Energy, blockchains, cybersecurity, fraud, for financial, like there's so many different industries. And the $1 trillion industries, they don't need to get all of it. They need to get a small slice of it to really deliver shareholder value. And if you can get a small slice of many different industries, there's a real potential for them to be a market leader. So is that ultimately why you're excited for them? You think they kind of have the best tech in this space that could allow them to become a theoretical monopoly in multiple industries, at least for the time being?
Sure. So I'm gonna soften the blow a bit on that. I think that there never has to be one winner. I think there can be a couple of winners who have differentiated value and will oftentimes work together a layer on top of each other. My experience working, especially with the biggest companies out there, is there is standardization, and then there's also some other players for key areas. I think what's exciting about the way Palantir is approaching this is they've been very thoughtful about how
basically meaning there's some companies that have like a broad approach. It's like they could fit almost every business out there. They could help almost everybody. And there's certain companies that are really specialized and they really do great at their niche, and that's their specialty, right? So I think it's important to understand.
They wanted to be
He's basically not saying like Palantir's the best in the world and, no one's going to use anything other than Palantir, which I think, is a very practical approach coming from a gentleman that's in this industry.
Dominant player in the military and government sector, right? We know that. This is like the thing that actually stands out to me the most about Palantir that gets me excited is Apollo. I think a lot of people get excited about the visualization layers and the operational layers and how they're going to bring it to commercial and military, et cetera. But the biggest challenge in 2022 is almost all enterprises out there, government, private sector, whatever. They have disparate data that lives on legacy old systems. They've got it on brand new systems like AWS, Azure, et cetera. And they need it to all basically be brought together in one place. So if you think about the way architecture works in and around analytics and AI, right? We've got your company's different data sources, right? Then we need a connectivity layer. Then we need an operational layer. Then we need to sort of like deploy those things out. Every company's got that data layer. You can then treat Apollo as a standalone singular company almost that acts as that connectivity layer. And that's the piece for me that is the absolute biggest challenge, hands down in the commercial space. And if you're solving for that, that's where I start to get pumped up, because the ability to connect to public and private clouds, gov-level clouds, heavily governed spaces, as well as Excel sheets and data warehouses that live on a computer. That layer gives you the ability to then really scale at speed on, Foundry as that next level for enterprise, for example. So when I think about this, and I approach it with customers, this is just my perspective. I don't work for them. To me, it's like, let's really embrace all of your data no matter where it lives. And then, what executives oftentimes say is, well, that's bad data. In 20 years, I'm yet to ever see good data. I'd love to know what it looks like because it doesn't exist. Because every day, some data becomes stale or outdated, or someone enters a name wrong or a revenue number wrong, or there's a sensor that goes bad. So there's always bad data. But the question is, how fast can we prepare that data and look and find those anomalies that live within it? And by having a strong AI tool to recognize in workflow, in the flow of what it's doing, and flag, here's a problem, there's a problem, this doesn't fit. What we can then start to think about is performing AI at a data level. And we haven't really gotten to this yet, but this is the cool stuff that absolutely no one talks about because they don't see it, right? At the data level, we're connecting and we're merging and we're joining these things. It's a big process. It doesn't have to be hard, but it is a big process. What we're starting to see a lot of companies do that's really cool is they're applying AI machine learning, at the data flow level. So things like real-time sentiment analysis of survey comments as they come in and metricing those against other KPIs. We're looking at the ability to time series forecasting or missing values because something came over from accounting or finance or an ERP system, which is like a transactional system, right? And it doesn't have all the values in it, right? So we can start to predict and prescribe what those values should be to help us still get to that endpoint. And that ability to start to apply AI at a data level, at an operational level, at an output level, this is where that intelligent blanket starts to come in, and all points are operating off of the same vision of the same customer, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're really working towards is this complete 360 of our customer, whether it's the government or a plane or a net new sale for your company, right? Like we want that 360 to understand everything we can know about that customer, from how they buy to how they consume to how they get retained. And that's what this whole piece of it really comes down to for me, is that platform approach.
And sort of your argument here for being bullish on Palantir is that they have what seemingly is a technology that other companies don't have because of their patents, because of their why do they have this in Google and the other guys?
Yeah, great question. And this is a good segue to cover this. When you start with non-mission critical, non-life or death situations, right? And God forbid, it's terrible that we have to have those, right? But let's just call it what it is. If you and I start an AI company tomorrow, which we could do, okay? We can grab some commonly used algorithms. We can throw them into a box, throw a patent on them because we have a special color we apply to it. And we've got an AI company, right? We could probably raise $250,000 by the end of next week, and we're up and running. And we're going and trying to sell this, churn reduction solution to customers. And the problem is my model hasn't had time to properly learn. It's easy to say things like, well, I've gotten some old data. It's like, yeah, but we're moving at the speed of light. like the things that are happening to companies nowadays at a macroeconomic and global perspective are insanely quick and fast. The likelihood of someone buying a solution is just as likely as a stock going up or down nowadays, right? So you really need to have that long tail ability to show, here's how our models have performed.
They don't make this point in this video, but I think it's an important point when understanding Palantir. The more success Palantir has, the more big companies that use it, the easier Palantir's job of selling is, because you got to understand all these big executives are connected with other big executives, and if Palantir does a great job for them, they're going to tell their colleagues or friends or whatever you want to call them, right, that work for other companies, hey, obviously if they're a direct competitor, they may not tell them, but they're going to tell them, hey, Palantir's helping out our business. So the great news is the more success Palantir has, the more success it's going to naturally breed through word of mouth, through executives telling them, hey man, yeah, it was a lot to get it started, but once we got rolling, like it's been a game changer for our business.
All environments in real time with real data flowing and streaming in. Simply having the ability to say, hey, here's a historical view of how my company has done things. It's not that powerful to me. Right. The amount and the vast types and arrays of data that are coming from military and government applications that have allowed these guys to perfect their platform from the standpoint of how they work with data, how they join it and merge it, and then how they deploy it. That is a moat that you can't beat simply by getting some old data sets and running tests against. And there's going to be people who watch this and say, totally wrong. I could do that. It's not that you can't do it, but it's having a live working model. And here's what we know. These agencies keep buying. They keep coming back to buy more because it's delivering real-time results. Being able to take and build a company to detect whether a drone can in real time send back IoT data on geospatial positioning, coordinate tracking, and the ability to have a weapon system. You can't fake these things, right? That's real data points in real time with a lot of change. So the fact that they started in the private and defense, in the defense sector and government sector for me is a major bonus. The fact that they've got a team of people who specialize in commercial markets is a really exciting thing for me. And I want to call something out here because I think there's a lot of other folks on YouTube and in this environment that do this. I don't look at companies by stock price. I'm a huge investment guy. I've got a background in alternative investments, capital markets, whatever. But I start with the company, right? Too many people start with like the price, the market cap, and how much it's moved in 10 days. Like I'm looking at this and I'm saying where I was 20 years ago to where I am today is astronomically, unbelievably different. But guess who was there back then? Well, Palantir was. Right. And some others were too, of course. And I'm bullish on a bunch of different folks too, but I'm not on everybody. And say to myself, in 10 years, are we going to have more data or less data? Of course, more. Is it going to be more disparate? Yes. Is it going to be more siloed and coming from new types of systems? Of course, it's obvious. So what I'm looking at a baseline is, does this company have the type of leadership, the vision, the interoperability, connectivity, and the ability to execute at scale that gets me excited as someone who has to, unfortunately, compete with them, frankly. And I want to know, like, what do I need to do to beat them? And I want to talk to another point here, too, that we didn't quite cover.
It's interesting. He says he has to compete with Palantir. And that's something that should be very, very telling. If this gentleman has to compete with Palantir and yet he's long the stock of Palantir, yeah, that's a pretty bullish indicator, I would call it, because usually people don't buy the stock of a competitor unless they say, oh man, this competitor has something pretty darn good going on. And, his approach to a stock like Palantir is very much an approach you have to take to big growth companies because they're always going to trade at rich valuations compared to where you would want them at. I don't think I've ever seen a growth company trade at a low forward P, like a true growth company. I'm talking about a company that's going to grow 20% plus a year for years and years to go in the future, which Palantir said they're going to do 30% or more per year for many, many years to go in the future. I've never seen one of those companies trade at super cheap price to sales or forward Ps or Ps or things like that. So you have to really take an approach of understanding the company on a higher level and really understanding how they're going to scale revenues massively over the coming years and net income that they'll get to a point where whatever their market cap's at today is a joke compared to what they're going to be earning. Tesla did that great. When I first started buying Tesla, that was a company that was, a $30-40 billion market cap, something like that. I mean, in 22, a lot of folks expect them to do 10 billion plus in net income. And the stock could have technically looked overpriced when I was buying that stock. And now it looks like, if it was still at the same valuation, it'd be the cheapest stock in the stock market.
Biggest challenge, actually, there's a couple things too. I'm getting going here. Man. You got it. There's a couple of really exciting things here too. We need systems that can be up and running quickly. This doesn't mean that they're at 100% optimization on day one, but how fast can I plug you in, turn you on, and start to build some models, start to get some variance, start to understand what kind of segmentation, classification, correlations I'm seeing. Because of their build of Apollo with Foundry, they can do these things very quickly, where the system will recognize data connections, start to make those connections, pull them together, and allow you to start to operationalize on that. I've done my homework on the architecture of how they build. So this isn't like my version of like I read a website and we're talking for 30 minutes about it. Like I understand their architecture at scale. It's very interesting the way they do it in terms of how they can connect so many disparate systems. And the fact, if you look at it just purely from the way they work with like DoD, CIA, et cetera, they're so high up in where they're allowed to access data at like classified cloud levels. That's really says something, because those systems need to be merged and combined with those other systems. They're doing that. So the other piece of Palantir that's got me particularly excited, I could talk about 50 different things here, but that's
a good point. Palantir is arguably the most trusted company pretty much in the in the entire United States when it comes to working with the government. And I think that's just a big telling thing. Like, if the government can trust Palantir to access even the most classified things, why can't you as a big company, right? So some food for thought there.
They came out recently, a couple of weeks ago, I know a bunch of us made videos on it, on their certification program.
Yep.
I think that most people do not understand what a big deal this is because they don't work in this space. So the key here is how do you create something that's bigger than yourself, okay? Palantir is a pretty big company. People know who they are. They know the name. They understand that you need AI and analytics, even if they don't know what it means, okay? But a certification program means that what we can start to do is build an ecosystem that goes beyond who we are, right? This means now other companies benefit from me releasing new products or from when I release new updates, right? I'm going to have a world of consultants who make their living on installing, implementing, and refining my system. What this means is those same people want to start to generate their own income and build their own system integrator partners. And they now are going to start to push Palantir because they see the value it's bringing, and then they'll have their own references of successful clients when they go out and get their new clients.
Right.
There's a reason why the biggest, best companies on this planet have massive ecosystems of certified professionals for their programs. It's because that's how you scale without hiring. Speaking of hiring, we know that this big push to go into commercial is one of the most important things that Palantir can be doing right now. If you look at their careers page, it is absolutely loaded with positions. Not just like a handful of salespeople, but everything from product to finance to ops to marketing to sales to service. I mean, they're hiring in a big way in big time. And I think it's going to bring a lot of heat into the market. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, like I'm even looking at like what that certification involves, whether or not something I would consider taking. So those are really big things. And I think that the numbers sort of speak for themselves. I'm a numbers guy, so I tend to remember numbers. So I'll just give you a couple that like stood out to me. When I know they got earnings coming up now in a couple of weeks. I was reviewing their numbers from last quarter, and just sort of like the level of change that we're seeing is really important. And I think what I'm looking for is how is that trend going and how is it continuing towards this move to becoming more commercial focused? But like just the things that stood out to me, man. Q3 revenue up 36%, right? Q3 commercial revenue was 37 year over year. Okay. Commercial revenue growth rate was 103% year over year. These are not like big company numbers. These are startup numbers. Okay. Like 34 new customers, 46% commercial customer growth quarter.
That's the thing. Some folks like to point at Palantir and be like, this company's been around for, 20 years or whatever it is. It's been around for a while. Let's just put it that way. And they're like, isn't this some old legacy company? And it's like, you look at the revenue growth this company has and you look at how many customers are acquiring. It seems like they just, we're very focused on just kind of the U.S. government for a long time. And now they're really have branched out over the past several years to becoming a commercial company. And it's just like the growth is insane. I mean, just insane growth.
Right. Commercial customers in the commercial segment grew by 135%. Okay. And when we're talking about big deals, because let me tell you, man, like the institutional investors, they want to hear about the small deals, the mid-market deals. What they really care about is big deals. Okay.
Yeah.
In Q3, they took down 54 deals of at least $1 million or more, right? 33 million were over 5 million, 18 were over 10 million. And you start to think about that. All that was happening, the growth, the additional net new customers, and they went from negative adjusted free cash flow to positive adjusted cash flow of over 119 million.
Right.
When you think about those kinds of numbers, this isn't me getting excited about a market cap or a stock price or whether I think I'm going to trade in and out of it in the next 2.5 weeks here. What I start to look at is this is a customer who has a trajectory going in the right direction, chasing new customers in a new segment that they want to own and specialize in. And their numbers are showing that they're able to turn cash flow positive with all of this. Now, I do think that there's a number of things that I would be super concerned with on the next earnings call if I heard these things happen. And I also think that there's a lot of opportunities for me as an investor and trader and how I play this in a safe way. And I'm happy to speak to both if time's allowing for it. You let me know.
Yeah. Can you speak to some of the things you're worried about coming into earnings?
Yeah. So not worried, but watching for. And then I'll be worried based on what they are. So number one, I want to understand from like a development perspective in the marketplace in and around the certification program. What's the feedback? Who's signing up for it? Is it growing? Right. And then tied to the same, I put this into a bucket of like, global use, right? We've got developers, we've got certifications, and we've got Foundry focusing on the startup space. I want to know from the standpoint of those startups, and they may not talk about this on the call, but like these are questions I'll typically ask them on that call. You might hear me on that call. I want to understand, are the startups expanding? What's the feedback? Are they using it? Are they not using it? What don't they like? As they're growing, their companies, is this going to be an integral part of how they grow? So at that baseline, I want to understand growth rates for these non-direct business things, but the impact of these non-direct business things.
Right.
The other big concern I have, and this is not with Palantir, this is with all companies that I watch who are under a certain size, is we need more different clients, right? The fact that they have a huge government spend, that's awesome. That's what's going to keep them around and keep them safe.
Yeah.
But I need to see more healthcare, more retail, more CS&G, more financial, FinServe, right? I need to see more manufacturing. Like, I want to see a spread out of more clients of different types where they're going to have more stories to share to gain more customers in those industries and sectors.
So you're not that scared about like 418 million in revenue versus 434. You're more concerned about the clientele base.
You know what? I think people think that they're investors and they're traders. I think there's people who think they're traders and they're actually investors. You know, and I think this speaks to the fact that folks don't know how to properly play and hedge their positions. So fear becomes the driving factor of missing a number.
Yep.
Analysts are awesome at their jobs. Okay. Their job's to take what they know about the company.
I disagree.
Through a model that they have tweaked to their own fitting. And then they determine a price, and based on that price, they will say where a stock price should be after looking at the financials and what they believe the financials should come in at. Being slightly up or down or off, to me, is always a blip in the radar. If it's 2 or 3 quarters we're going in the wrong direction, yeah, now we have a trend and we got to start to worry about it. But like, if this thing drops a couple bucks because they missed a revenue number or cash flow number, everything we just talked about for 40 minutes, does any of that at all get affected by missing by $2 million on the bottom line? Of course not. Right. But the reality is we live in a world where reporting, if they could report by the day, people want companies to report by the day.
That's an annoying thing with the stock market. It's like you could have a company that has such a great growth trajectory in front of it, and you know everything's great, but if they miss this little number here, they're like, oh, that margin's a little off there. All of a sudden the stock tanks 10-20%. As a long-term buyer, it's awesome because you get to buy more shares, but it is annoying to like see like people really are trading in and out of the stock based upon if they miss this number a little bit or hit this number. It gets a little annoying, especially if you're a true long-term investor that's in companies for several years. Like I said, the only good thing with that is if you're looking to acquire more shares, you get to buy them for cheaper.
What we have to do is take a humongous step back and say, will the ability to analyze data at scale in real time in complex ways, but yet deliver it in a user-friendly, actionable output be needed in the next 5 years? I'm telling you, yes. I have 60 meetings a week. The answer is yes. Everyone and their mother and their brother and their uncle wants to be doing this because they know they cannot compete until they do it. There are only so many players who can do it thoroughly and in a platform approach. I want to speak to the platform piece quickly, but I want to just finish this thought. Yep. The other issue, of course, too, is will they be able to continue the growth rates of those commercial customers, right? So we know that the government contracts are sticking around. We know that they're getting bigger. We know there's a backlog to the contractual obligations there, so they're having to execute on those contracts. But will we keep seeing that same doubling of commercial space, right? That's the stuff that gets me excited because that market, the TAM for commercial, is massive. Yeah. And the more power they generate for the clients, the more those clients end up making in revenue, and that revenue comes back to them to do more work. And it's the same flywheel effect of growth. Super quick point on platform versus application. There are tons of AI applications out there today. And I think when most people think about AI, what they're confusing AI with is an application. Siri is an application, right? Waze is an application, right? A churn or a sale or whatever, right? Pick your app that solves for a specific business need. That's an application. I want the platform that can give me the ability to connect and do whatever I want. I want to be able to go and look at my data and ask real questions. Which of my customers are increasing in their spend? Why? And how do I get them to increase more? How do I bucket my customers into my likely to buy product XYZ with the highest degree margin? Those are the questions I want to ask to a platform that touches on all data everywhere, that I can have control over how I want that model to be deployed and run in the back end. Excuse me. Those are the things that I'm looking for, is how is this platform growing and being embraced by the clients out there today?
And that's a little bit of the reason why it's kind of hard to sell the platform, right? Because the client just might want the app, but you've got to sell them on this 8 million. So like, can you speak to like how you think they're going to resolve that eventually?
Absolutely. So let's speak to the biggest problem of why so many.
Alex Karp, in an interview I watched recently, by the way, he was hinting to the fact that they could, break apart some of their products more often, rather than like, you have to sell this entire, massive thing, this entire blanket. You could potentially, pick and choose a la carte a little bit. And it's not a bad way to get in the door, rather than have to sell this massive thing. If you can get, this thing, they kind of help them out a little bit. You get in the door and then they realize the power that you have and that you can help their business. It's not a bad strategy at all.
This wrong. Most of the folks that I engage with and talk to about these types of investments, they cannot get their head out of the world of consumers. Like, well, I just want an answer on my phone right now. Cool. That's how a consumer buys. You don't have the skill sets to build it, deploy it, and connect it to all of your data sources. Right. In the realm of B2B, what we need is fully interoperable systems that can connect to everything, as we said a couple times today, connect to everything, pull it together, create a standardized approach, and then deliver insights that generate more business for them. God, I'm going to go back in time here a little bit. Back in the early 2000s, when business intelligence was getting really popular, everything was all about how do I have an application to visualize sales or pipeline or customers that have churned, right? Name your metric. And then we started looking at predictive models, and these old systems were basically saying like, hey, here's a random score, 1 to 100. If the score is high, it's good. If it's low, it's bad, but there's no context to it. But that would have been enough for a business back then. A business today is facing so much competition at scale that it's not enough to know my customers who are likely to churn. What I really need, and this is the power of the platform, I need to understand the signals and the indicators that are in the data that I can then break down even further and operationalize on. So you might be able to get a list of customers who are likely to download your app, right? But I want to understand what is the makeup of those customers. And I want to go there deeper and start to cross-thread it with other factors so that when I put out that marketing campaign, I'm campaigning to Sean, who's 6'4", who has blue eyes, is 39 years old, and has a YouTube channel that works full-time in AI and analytics, right? How do I find more people who look exactly like that? That's the granularity that I want to get to, that only a platform that has all of the data, all of the models, all of the metrics, all of the work and operations behind it in one place. Because then I can look at that end-to-end perspective of the platform.
So why is that such a hard sell to these companies?
Yeah. So I'll give you a great reason. Commitment. Everyone wants AI, but they don't want to put the money behind doing it the right way.
Right.
And what happens is there's a lot of priorities.
I'm gonna make this point before I forget. The great news is, if it's something that's hard to commit, yeah, that's tough to get through the door. But what I will say is this is one of the reasons I think Palantir is going to build into a very, very sticky business model, is once they're through the door and a company's using them and having success, and all your data and all your information is kept with Palantir, it's going to be hard to break out of that cycle for potentially decades with a company. Unless there's something that comes along that's massively better than Palantir. Why would a company switch? And that gives the Palantir pricing power long term.
You're running a modern company today. You're the CRO, okay? As a CRO, you're responsible for top line, bottom line. You're responsible for net new sales, renewals, net revenue retention. You have so much on your plate that you need a sales system, you need a renewal system, you need a customer experience system, and a customer success system, say, right? Do you really want to take on a multi-year AI project connecting all of your IT resources to your sales resources to your accounting resources? Also, then your data team has to be involved. There's a lot of considerations there, and not a lot of companies really have a strategic vision for this. There's no insult to anyone there, for anyone who watches this and maybe recognizes me, but like the main problem is there's never been training for the modern executive on how to think about autonomous insights at scale. You can take an MBA class, you can do whatever you want, but no one's teaching how to leverage artificial intelligence to drive prioritization within your business. So a lot of times the people who get it just happen to be very visionary
and remember, most executives of companies are, 45 to 65, right? So, it's hard to for those folks to sometimes wrap their head around artificial intelligence and how all this can help their business.
The companies that are out there looking for people like chief data officers or digital transformation officers, those are the folks who have a vision for it and understand the marketplace and how they want to go to market in and around it. And the reality too is these products don't always produce results. If you start working with a company that doesn't do what they say they're going to do, can't deliver on those outputs, you spend a lot of money for something that has zero value at the end of the day. And tweaking a model that's not working right is a lot more effort than your team is going to typically be able to handle. But again, this speaks to that certification and ecosystem piece, right?
Right.
And it's also a long-time sale, right? No one's going in and selling a platform in a month to an enterprise customer in the software space. You're talking months, years, sometimes multiple years to really get it right and get it sort of scaled throughout the entire enterprise. And the other piece too, just for those who are curious, it is very easy to try out a business intelligence tool. Does it show me a pretty graph when I point it at my data? Yes, cool, it works. Trying to trial or pilot or do a proof of concept in and around artificial intelligence and modeling is very tough because the model needs time to learn, to get better, to become more statistically relevant on your data in your business. So a lot of times there's also an understanding that these are not one-year projects. These might be 5-year projects that take a very long time to sort of get to the endpoint and really show the full results of what it is. So that's a consideration as well.
I have a question for you. If AT&T signs a full deal with Palantir, like, I don't know, $30 million deal for like 5-6 years, and the entire organization of AT&T, from Warner Media to everything they own, all their data is integrated with Palantir. Does that mean Verizon then has to go with Palantir? Like if a company in a space uses Palantir, is that good for Palantir because the competitor also has to at least take a look into why are they using Palantir and why are we not?
100%. So we have this, in this business, we have our, the NASCAR slide. It's that slide where it has all of your customers that are in the similar sector or industry. And I'm going to show that to you because I want you to say like, whoa, am I really the only one not on that slide?
Right.
And then what happens is, this is really going to the details here, but you then want to be able to start to speak on what you're doing because you're going to grow your brand as an executive now. You're not just an executive at AT&T. You're the executive who's embracing the future, AI, autonomous learning. So there's a lot of ego stroking that can happen as well to make sure that like you're supporting the vision and the go-to-market around that with strong business cases, et cetera, for these folks to buy into the platform. And my take on Palantir is they're building out the sales team because they have yet to really do that at scale in the commercial space.
Right. Makes sense. Here's a big one. I want you to talk.
Palantir, by the way, hasn't even had much of a sales team in its history. That's actually a new vector for them. So imagine as they scale up a sales team through direct or independent contractors and consultants and things like that. Oh my gosh, it's still, that's like first inning stuff for them, really.
You definitely, I don't know if you'll be able to talk about this, but I'm like 99% certain you will be able to talk about this because you understand the industrial architecture of the platform. Palantir talks a lot about being the ontology of an organization in terms of the ability to connect relational databases. Can you break down what does it mean for Palantir to be the ontology of a company's data?
So at its most basic level, here's the problem, is there is a lot of risk in the modern enterprise of who is seeing data, how they're seeing it, and the value that they're pulling from it, both from a standpoint of whatever was leaked, how does it come back to the way they're running their business? If you can represent the golden ticket of knowledge for your business, right? Just in this case, I'm assuming that's what they mean for Palantir. If we know that there's a single place where all the data is connected with how it's connected, what it's connected to, secondary connections, and I can go back and track any issue with data all the way back to a source system, that gives me a centralized location to understand everything I need to know about what we're seeing, why we're doing things, what decisions were made. But also, no one wants to be on Bloomberg tomorrow night because their system got hacked. They want to be able to track back who has access to this, which hierarchies of permission sets are tied back to which data sets and data sources. And oftentimes we also hear this quite a bit where I want my sales team to have what they need, but I want my finance team to have what they need, and I want, whatever. This is a way where some people need it all. So I'm going to turn on total permission to see everything that sits within that central location of data from an analytics perspective in this case. And I'm going to give some people access to certain types of data. Some people have access to other data flows and models that are coming out. That's the way to think about it is we just need to be able to track back who, what, where, and why was data touched, integrated, and used, and for what reason, outcome, system, et cetera, is it being done. Nowadays, the modern architecture, it doesn't look like that. It's thousands of lines, interconnected, cross-weaved, and oftentimes the wrong systems with outdated data.
Right. And if Palantir can become the ontological backbone of an organization, then that becomes incredibly valuable at that point. Two last questions for you. Number one, SPACs. How do you feel about that theory? Do you think it's a cool little play to get in front of these companies that are going to become pioneers of different industries using data? Are you bullish on the thesis? Why do you think they're doing the SPACs?
Okay, so I went through Y Combinator startup school a while back. And one of the cool things about that is I think about it in the same way that they invest in their successful companies that come out. They have investor day where they have people who are trained in the YC ways, then invest in their YC companies. And this has made them wildly successful because they're in at the ground floor and can influence the way a company goes.
Right.
When I look at Foundry and the way they work with brand new startups, like one person, two person entrepreneur teams to build their companies, they're standardizing on their product right from the get-go. They're going to be able to help guide them and direct them towards the best way to deploy that and get that out to the market. So the SPAC process for them is an easy way to capitalize and cash out as the sponsor of that SPAC.
Right.
And know the process of who they're getting behind when they do it. Now, from a business risk perspective, the risk is huge. They could blow up. SPACs could become the big no-no to touch in the investment world, right? Who knows? But it's not surprising though, because if you look at the leadership team and the funding team here, right? We've got Teal, we've got Lionsdale. These are hardcore PE VC guys who are going to want to have opportunities to have other exits and outcomes. This is an easy way. Well, let's even take that further back. I mean, I think people don't realize this is just super common.
Yeah.
We talk about Palantir because most people don't dig into the weeds of the other huge tech companies. They're all doing the same thing. Sometimes what they'll do is just act as VC or PE for them rather than a SPAC. The SPAC actually sort of completes the process where they now can just take it and put it out in the public eye.
Right.
So I think that it's an interesting play, but one we're going to have to see how it works out. Now, in my opinion, they could just as easily do DPOs or IPOs with them as well, and just simply be a shareholder in that process as opposed to doing it in a SPAC. But I'm indifferent either way. I've heard some of the negatives, and I see them in your comments too sometimes. And it speaks to the fact that a lot of folks don't seem to understand exactly how this works, because the SPACs you hear about on TV are very negative, because that's what gets people to turn on CNN or whoever. And it's always talking about a SPAC scam or this one went bad, or they'll point to electric vehicles where 30 different people SPACed on the same day, basically. SPACs have been around for a long time. It's just a new name for something that's been happening forever. This is just an easy way to get liquid on your investment within a company that you've been investing in. So I'm indifferent towards it. I don't know if it helps or hurts. I think the reality is, if we know where they've already put the money, we can calculate that risk in as part of the overall valuation of the company. Right. And if we think that there's room for upside on any of those SPACs, it's very easy to build that into a high-end model where we're going to be on price as well.
Right. Makes sense to me.
I don't think you should be investing in Palantir for, the whole SPAC situation. You should, if this is a stock you're considering, it's got to be based upon the actual underlying business fundamentals.
Given you are bullish on Palantir, given you are obviously making content about the company, you're consuming content about the company, you're understanding it from a real technical perspective. Do you truly think Karp and Teal are the guys to lead this company to the promised land over the next decade? How do you feel about visionary leadership behind it?
I love that question. So, God, that's such a good question. So, oftentimes the way we think about these things is
I've watched so many Carp interviews now. Man, I don't know what to say about him. Like, he just seems like he's all over the place. Sometimes he doesn't directly answer questions, but I don't know. Maybe that's just who he is.
The person who's really good at getting to 50 million. There's another person who's really good at getting to $250 million, and then $1 billion, and so on. And then there's unicorns. Unicorns are folks like Carp. Carp is to someone who doesn't work around the data science a lot, right? And the people who are in this realm, it is very easy to look at this guy and be like, eccentric, out of his mind, lots of negative connotations they might make. And they have to realize that he is just outrageously intelligent and doesn't care about the bullcrap and the negative stories and the silliness behind it. His sole focus is creating a globally dominant company that integrates data at scale to drive business. So as long as he stays on that mission of that single-minded ability to execute as a CEO and then has the team around him to support operations, finance, governance, I think this is an unbelievable great team. And Thiel, of course, you know, so much negative news comes up. Yeah, like he's like fire. Like he can keep you warm, he can burn you. It just depends how you look at him. I think that with Thiel's mind for business is so strong that he's going to make sure he's bringing the right people in here to keep expanding the right kind of ways. I think a very good tie-in to this is like every time we talk about like a genius billionaire founder, it's the same connotation. Like Elon, right? You love me, hate him. Zuckerberg, you love me, hate him. Dorsey, you love me, hate him. But no one can deny that their companies are absolutely massive and gigantic, because when you have a single-minded focus on being the best, building the best, and developing and pursuing the best, those are the people I want running the companies that are in growth stage for me. You know, and I think it speaks volumes to the fact that people don't understand him.
Well, from what I see, actually, Thiel owns more of Palantir than it looks like Carp does. That's interesting.
You don't understand him. This guy is an absolute genius who's developing, you know, integrated AI operational systems at scale for the military for the past 20 years. But it's only gotten popular really because they went DPO and they have a cool name and some AI going on. I would have invested in these guys back in 07, 08 if I could have. In fact, I called NASDAQ's private markets and tried to get shares. I couldn't. No one was selling. So, you know, it just speaks to the value that like they've been on the same trajectory for 2 decades and it's still working and they're still doing well and they're still growing and the numbers are improving. I think what can you say about a founder who has a brilliant mind, the ability to execute on it, and the numbers back up what he's saying? I don't know. I think it seems like the right guy to me.
We'll leave it
Pretty
at that.
exciting.
Very, very exciting time. Thank you so much, Sean, for being on the channel and shedding your insight. Again, I think you're someone who...
Yeah, thank you to this gentleman that did that video there and the gentleman that was speaking there. I think that was a really good video. And let me know in the comment section if you enjoy something like this, because every once in a while I find a gem out there on YouTube, and usually I just keep it to myself. But if you guys enjoy something like this, we can go over more of these hidden gems that I find every once in a while. And also make sure everybody says thank you to this gentleman that did the interview and whatnot, and this gentleman that, you know, obviously, you know, just gave us a bunch of I would almost call it like inside knowledge on the industry and in his understanding and in his thoughts on this. I think that's big. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. As always, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And if you want some free stocks from Moo, check out the pinned comment down there. Much love as always, guys, and have a great day. Let me know what your thoughts are on Palantir.